So now we will see the kingdom of South India. Okay, so in South India, you need to remember a brief chronology wherein we will see first empire as the Pallava Empire. Okay, after Pallavas, we will find Cholas. Okay, and in between also you will find certain dynasties that we will discuss as and when they come. But if you talk about from the art and culture perspective, you must have found that you discuss first about Pallavas, because this is where the Dravidian architectural style, actually Dravidian architectural style of temple building started, and then it attained its peak during the Cholas, wherein the Brihadeshwara temple, the Gangaikonda, Cholapuram temple, etc. got constructed. Okay, so here we will start from Pallavas and then we will proceed. So let's start with the Pallavas. So the Pallava Empire, you must remember, there were 3 to 4 main rulers. Okay, it started with Mahendra Varman, then it went to Narsi Varman I, then it went to then it went to Rajsimham or Rajendra Varman, and then it went to again Narsi Varman II. Okay, this is how the chronology will flow. So you will find that Mahendra Varman, okay, and all these Pallava rulers had the surname called Varman. Okay, so even this Varman surname is also found in one of these Southeastern Asian countries, wherein you find they also had a Varman Empire. So you need to tell me in the comments which is that country wherein the rulers also used this Varman surname. Okay, like this Varman in the end. So you will find that Pallava Empire was established somewhere around 600 AD. And the dates are still contested, but roughly we say this is around it is around this time only that we see the Pallava Empire getting established. And here we see basically the starting of the Dravidiya style of temple making. So in Gupta style, you must always remember that Guptas were the one where the Nagara style of temple making achieved its peak. And how is Nagara and Dravida style of temple making different? So you will find that in Dravida, first of all, you need to understand the region where these two are prevalent. Okay, so there is a Nagara style of architecture and there is a Dravida style of architecture. In Dravida style, you will find that, if there is a temple, you will have something called as Viman, like in a pyramidal shape, and then you have a Shikhar, and then you have a Kalash. Okay, you have Garbha, you have Garbhagriha, which is a sanctum sanctorum where the deity is placed. You have a Mandap, then it is surrounded by walls, like large walls. Then these it also has large gateways called as Gopurams. Okay, there is always a water tank which is available inside the complex. But Nagara style, you will find that walls are not there. There is no water tank. Okay, there is no large presence of Gopuram. Even Shikhar is there, and then you will find Kalash. There is no Viman concept here. Okay. These are like the broad differences. Within Nagara also, that there is Odisha style, there is Khajuraho style, and then there is Gujarat style, which is a Solanki style of architecture. Okay, and then so here we study the region wise, but in Dravida style, you will find we study dynasty wise. Like there is Pallavas and there is Cholas. Okay, during Pallavas, we see that first of all there was a rock. Okay, in which this opening was made and a deity was placed here. Okay, so this was like basically cave temples. Then these cave temples got beautified by giving them like this staircase type structure. Okay, like this. Then the third stage came where proper like temple complexes being started getting built. For example, the Shore Temple at Mahabalipuram or Mamalapuram, which was very famous because there was a second informal India-China summit which took place at this particular place. Okay, so Mamalapuram, Mahabalipuram, here only you will find that there is a descent of Gange, there is Arjun's penance. Okay, and like that there are 2-3 more like important points about this Mamalapuram or Mahabalipuram. And after that, again, you will find basically more temple complexes getting built. Okay, this was like a very brief introduction of how your ancient history is linked with your art and culture. So now let's come to the chronology again. So you will find that in 600 AD, your Mahendra Varman, who is the first Pallava ruler, he basically establishes basically gives the foundation of the Pallava Empire. Okay, and after that you will find that I already told you, see, there are 2-3 things happening. This is 600 AD, right? So in 600 AD, remember, there is a Harshvardhan's empire in this UP area, which like Kannauj area. Then he is continuously fighting across this Narmada. Okay, see, Harshvardhan empire could not cross, Harsha could not cross these Vindhyas and Narmada river. So his empire was limited till Vindhyas. After that, below you will find here are Chalukyas. And below Chalukyas, in the southern India portion, you will find somewhere here are the Pallavas. Okay, so these 3 dynasties are basically what? They are contemporaries of each other. Harsha, Chalukyas, and then Pallavas. So meanwhile, when Chalukyas are actually fighting with the Harsha, they are also fighting with the Pallavas. Okay, so hence I am saying that Pulakesin II of Chalukya, the same person who fought with the Harshvardhan, okay, he is the same person who was actually defeated by the Pallavas. Okay, but that means here he is winning and here he is getting defeated. Okay, then you will also find that here in 610 AD there is an Eastern Chalukyan dynasty of Vengi. Okay, somewhere here which is founded right now in this 610 AD. Okay, then after Mahendravarman comes the Narsimhavarman. Okay, Narsimhavarman first also he is called. Okay, and then his reign starts. Then after that, you will find that Hyun Sang, which came at the Harsha's court, obviously he gets a chance and he visits the other parts of India also to see how Buddhism is present there and is Buddhism actually flourishing or not. And so you will find that Hyun Sang actually visits Kanchi, which is the Kanchipuram, which is somewhere here in Tamil Nadu. Okay, and he also basically visits the court of Pulakesin too. Okay, then Pulakesin too gets defeated and he is defeated. Actually, see what is happening. I'll tell you, just give you a brief chronology. This Pulakesin too is a very powerful ruler of Chalukyan Empire. Okay, this Chalukyan dynasty. He actually defeats Harsha. He gets in a battle with Harshvardhan. He also gets in a battle with Mahendravarman. He defeats Mahendravarman, but then Mahendravarman's son Narsimhavarman actually defeats this Pulakesin too. Okay, to wo hota hai na, like we say, that the defeat of dad's rage. That rage is there in the son, so he basically wins the war against this Pulakesin too. Okay, so therefore it is said that Pulakesin too was defeated by Narsimhavarman I, who is the son of Mahendravarman. Okay, then you will find that Pallavas have been defeated by Chalukyas, obviously, because then you will again find that Chalukyas are actually fighting back with Pallavas, and finally there is a defeat of Pallavas by Chalukyas. Okay, then instead of Chalukyas, you will find that, see, in the if suppose I give you a particular state to control, what you will do? So there is you on the top, and then you will start appointing officers. Okay, and these officers then appoint other officers, and this is how your administration will flow. So these officers in the start, which are controlling land, which are controlling army, they were called the Samantas. So these Samantas were present even in the Chalukyan Empire, even though it was a unitary structure. Okay, it was a very strong centralized structure, but still you will find that in Chalukyan Empire, you had these Samantas, and these Samantas became powerful. And one of those Samantas then overthrow their own master Chalukyas and take over the empire, which is called as the Rashtrakutas. Okay, so finally what happens? Rashtrakuta actually, they overthrow the Chalukyas around 750 AD. Okay, and then in Rashtrakuta, you have a very famous ruler by the name of Krishna I. And he is the same Krishna I. He is the same ruler who actually builds the what? You remember that temple at Ellora? He is the one who builds that temple. Okay, which looks like the abode of Shiva, those like the Mansarovar, the Kailash Parbat temple. Okay, which is basically a monolithic temple where you start carving from the top and then you go down. So that particular temple is built by the Rashtrakutas during the Rashtrakuta Empire at Ellora caves. Okay, then comes the reign of Amogh Varsha, who is also a Rashtrakutan. Who's also Rashtrakutan ruler only, and Amogh Varsha is famous for his literary activities. Okay, and then after that you will find the Chalukyan dynasty is getting weak, because the next rulers that are coming, the Rashtrakuta Empire will soon start declining, because the rulers that are coming are not able to handle the vastness of the empire. Okay, so these are not that important, because especially from the perspective of UPSC. Okay, then here you will find in this 980 AD, there is a giant Jain statue of Lord Gomteshwara, wherein you will find that in 12 years, okay, there is that Abhishek ceremony that takes place, okay, at Shravanbelgola. Okay, and if you know, see, we discussed about Buddhism, we discussed about different sects like Theravada, Mahayana, Hinayan and Tantric. In Jainism also, we know that because there was a great stress situation in northern India, so basically what happened, there were two sects of Jainism that got developed. Okay, the one was basically the Digambas and other was Shvetambas. Okay, so Shvetambas, so the Digambas were the one which were joined by the Chandragupta I, the Maurya. The Mauryan king, Chandragupta, Mauryan king. Okay, he also undertook Jainism in the end. And finally, what he does is basically he, along with other Jainis, they actually went to South India to avoid the stressful situations in the North India, the natural situations that were happening, and they attained the title of Digambras. Okay, but the one who stayed back in the North India, okay, along with Stulabhahu, they attained the title of Shvetambas. So Digambras are the one, Digambar Jainis are the one who do not wear any clothes. They are basically they are naked, while the Shvetambas are the one who wear the white clothes. Like these are called the white clad, while the Digambars are called as the naked clad. Okay, so sky clad or naked clad. So now you will find out that Shravanbelgola is the same place where you know, like the first batch that went to South India, they undertook like fasting unto death, and then they finally achieved Kaivalya Gyan. Okay, they finally basically ended their life, and you will find that here the Jain statue is there of Lord Gomteshwara, and this Mahamastak Abhishek is the ceremony that took place very recently, I think 1 or 2 years back only, wherein like this statue, they pour a lot of milk, etc. They do proper Abhishek of the Lord. Okay, so Lord Gomteshwara is present here. Now in 985 you will find there comes the Rajaraja Chola. So after Pallavas, then came the Rashtrakutas, and then you have finally Cholas. Okay, now you do not get confused between two kinds of Cholas. Okay, so there is one Chola that you're reading here, and then there is another Cholas that you will read around, you will read about in the form of Imperial Cholas. Okay, that means one is Chera, Cholas and Pandyas. These Chera, Cholas and Pandyas are basically about the Sangam age. Okay, and Sangam age was much before this Pallavan Empire. Okay, so I know that it is not mentioned here, so we will take this discussion in a while. But before that, we need to study about Imperial Chola so that to maintain a continuity. Okay, so you will find out that, see, in North India and in South India. So in South India, around 200 BC to 300 AD or something, there before Pallavas, basically you have something called as Sangam age. What is Sangam age? Sangam age basically is that age where three Sangams or three major assemblies of all the greatest like poets and rulers and writers, etc. took place. Okay, two of them took place in Madurai, and these three Sangams took place, and that is why this is called as the Sangam age. This is the age wherein you find three great dynasties existing together. So if I have to draw basically a map, okay, so you will find Chera somewhere around Kerala. Okay, then there is Pandyas here, and then there is Cholas. Okay, so Cheras, Cholas and Pandyas. So Chera had the basically, if I have to talk about symbol, they had a symbol of bow and arrow. Okay, then they had a symbol of fish, and they had a symbol of tiger. Okay, they were like their state symbols. So Cheras, Cholas and Pandyas. So these are existing around 200, from 200 BC to 200 AD. But these Cholas like Rajaraja Chola, Rajendra Chola, they come around 1100 AD or something, and they are called as the Imperial Cholas or Cholas. These are the same Cholas, like these Cholas are the same Cholas where you find the bronze statue. Okay, Nataraj statue. So do not get confused. These Cholas, Pandyas are different, and these Imperial Cholas are different. Okay, so this Sangam age, let us just discuss like few points about Sangam age. And remember, the Sangam age is before Pallava. So here you need to put a sticky note and write about the Sangam age. Okay. So Sangam age, first of all, write about the years, write about the three assemblies that took place. Okay, and remember, of the first assembly, nothing survived. Like whatever documents were there, nothing survived. Second assembly, the Tolka PM is the only book that survived. And third assembly is basically where you have major works. Like for example, Mani Meghalai, which is the epic written by Satyanar. And you have you have Silapadikaram by Elango. Okay, these are two main epics. Just like we have Ramayana and Mahabharata, similarly there are two main epics of southern India also during the Sangam age. One is basically Silapadikaram written by Elango, and then is Mani Meghalai by Satyanar. So Mani Meghalai is basically continuation of Silapadikaram only, because Silapadikaram is a story about a court dancer and a couple basically, and how this particular fellow, he fell in love with this court dancer, and his wife Kannagi was there. Okay, and he confronts him and finally agrees that okay, he will not leave her, etc. And basically some mismatches happening, and then all this like interesting story is there in Silapadikaram. And then the daughter, okay, of this court dancer as well as this fellow is a story of this Mani Meghalai. Okay, I'm not telling you the exact same and everything, because then it will become really long and I have to explain the whole story. But it's a very interesting story. I mean, when we'll take this entire history in like great detail, I'll tell you about the Silapadikaram story also and Mani Meghalai story also. Okay, and then in the third assembly only you will find like books like Etu Togai, Pattu Pattu. Okay, so Etu Togai means 18 book collection of 18 books, etc. And then Pattu Pattu is about 10 books. And then you will also find basically Aham and Puram story. So here you'll also find the books written by like great teachers and writers, etc. Okay, in Sangam age you will also find that it is mentioned that how land was divided into 5 times of land. Okay, the hilly land was called the Karanj. Okay, then there was coastal land, then there was pastoral land, then there was agriculture land, and then there was desert land. Okay, then they had a four classification of the society. In Anantnar were the priests, then there was Aryas who were the like traders, etc. Or and then they had spies also, and then they had like common people. So there was like a fourfold classification also, and then you had different names from Brahmins, you had different names for agricultural people like Velavas, etc. So this is how you'll find that here you'll also find that sati was practiced, women ka condition was not that great, okay, and you will also find that land revenue or the land revenue and the agriculture revenue coming from agriculture was the major source of income. And here you also remember certain cities because see, in Cheras is basically today's what we call as Kerala, and here one city which was also the port city, which was Muziris. Okay, and this was in news because 1 year back I think they excavated something some place in Kerala and it had remained of Muziris also. So Muziris was a coastal town and it was a part of Chera Empire. Similarly, in Cholas you will find in Cholas and Pandyas. Okay, so in Cholas you will find that Urayur was their main town. Okay, and then there was Pumpohar. Urayur was the town, okay, which was famous for its cotton exports. Okay, here only you will find about the Arikamedu also, okay, which is basically the Pondicherry. And then Pandyas are basically today's Tamil Nadu. Okay, and so this is like the basic, very, very basic about the Cheras, Cholas and Pandyas of the Sangam age, okay, which came before the Pallavas. And also remember that these three, Cheras, Cholas and Pandyas, they had very intrinsic export and import contacts with different countries. They used to import wine, horses and gold, okay, and they used to export spices, okay, the ivory because they had huge forests and they had huge presence of elephants, so they used to export ivory, they used to export spices, they used to export like the semi precious stones, etc. And they also used to export these herbs because we had the presence like there are presence of Nilgiris and like all these important mountains which had a lot of these jadi booties, so they used to export these herbs, etc. also. Okay, and cotton was one of the major things to be exported. So this was about the Sangam age. Now, after Sangam age, basically came the Pallavas, for which we have already discussed. Then, during the Pallavas time only, there was Chalukyas, and Chalukyas were overthrown by Rashtrakutas. And after that, we see that there is basically incoming of Cholas. So these Cholas are also called as the Imperial Cholas. Okay, so Imperial Cholas came around 980 AD, and the first great ruler of Imperial Chola, like I'm not talking about the first ruler. Okay, I'm not talking about the founder of the Chola Empire. I'm talking about whom? I'm talking about the first great ruler of Imperial Cholas, which was Raja Raja I. Okay, remember, he is not the founder of Imperial Chola Empire. After Raja Raja I came his son called as Rajendra I. Okay, so Raja Raja I, he's the same ruler who established great contacts with Sri Lanka and all. He's the same ruler who basically constructed Brihadeshwara temple. Okay, also called as Raja Rajeshwaram temple. Okay, which is also called as a 1,000-pillar temple, and it was built around 1000 AD, and it basically celebrations were held because it completed some 1000 years of existence, and it is also one of the UNESCO World Heritage Sites. Okay, Great Living Chola Heritage or Monuments. Under that, Raja Raja Temple or Brihadeshwara Temple is also mentioned. Okay, or Great Living Chola Temple. And it has 1000 pillars and it has a great Viman. Okay, like it has a huge Viman. That means if this is a sanctum, if I have to build a temple, I'll just show you what I mean by Viman. So if this is a temple, then there is like a pyramidical structure like this. Okay, so it has one of the greatest Viman structures. I'm talking about the Raja Raja I Brihadeshwara temple. Okay, built by Raja Raja I. After Raja Raja I came the Rajendra Chola I, who basically built the Gangai Konda Cholapuram temple. Why is he called as the Gangai Konda Cholapuram? Because he took an expedition in North India and he was able to win over the rulers in the North India. That is why he was called as the victor of the Ganga Empire or the rulers of the Ganga Empire. Therefore, Gangai Konda Cholapuram. That means basically someone who took a victory over the Ganges Empire. Okay, or Ganges. So he built basically temple called as Gangai Konda Cholapuram or Rajendra I temple. Okay, not Varman, Rajendra I temple. Okay, and why did he won over Ganges? Because he was taking an expedition to Bengal where he won. Okay, then finally you will find that Chalukyas are still existing in some parts, and Cholas and Chalukyas are also fighting, but this is not that important. And then you will find there is Vikramaditya Chalukya who's who has defeated these Cholas, and then he is finally taking over the reign. Okay, and then you will find for some time there is a presence of Hoysala Empire. So Hoysalas, they came around 1100 AD, and Hoysalas are very famous for their construction of temples. Okay, and Hoysala style of architecture, if you must have read in the art and culture part, wherein they used to make like these star-shaped temples. Okay, which look like they were cut from a single rock, but they are not. Okay, and you will find that they used to do extensive carving. Okay, extensive carving, like there was no space left for anywhere to carve. Okay, and they had multiple shrines. So and here only you will find that Marco Polo from Italy, he visits he visits India. Okay, and what is this time? Time period is around 1290 AD. Okay, so we have seen Chinese travelers. Okay, and we have also seen a traveler from Italy like Marco Polo. We have seen a Indo-Greek traveler from Megasthenes. Okay, who came during the Chandragupta Maurya's time. We have seen Chinese travelers or Fayan, Hyunsang, and then there was Ising also, which came around 50 AD, like during the Kushan's Empire. And then we have seen these like Marco Polo coming from Italy. Okay. Now we will start. So one thing that we have still not covered is the Arab travelers, and then you will find that these Arab travelers started coming once basically there was a establishment of Islam. So Islam as a religion is a very new religion. It came around 700 AD. Not, I don't know the exact date, but I'm telling you the like basically an approximate time around 700 AD. Basically, it's a very new religion, and Islam got established. And after that only we will see that once Islam got established and people started accepting Islam, then you find basically the Arab travelers also started coming to India. Okay, so hence you will find that in 712 AD, they are basically Sindh. Arab. So if this is India, then this is the Sindh region, which is present in today's Pakistan. So Arabs basically took over Sindh. And in 730 AD, you will find that Yasur Raman of Kannauj, he was defeated by this Let Aditya. He was the king of Kashmir. So these are very what you can say as offshoot incidents that you don't need to remember as such for the exam perspective. But if you're from a particular state, then these become important. So depending on if you're from Rajasthan, then probably the battles of Prithviraj Chauhan and the battles of Haldighati, etc., will become important. For if you're from Kashmir, then this battle might become important, but not for generally for UPSC. Okay. And here you will find a tripartite struggle also going around. Okay, so here what we are doing is we are moving from ancient history to medieval history. Okay, and here we are studying about the transition, what is happening. So in northern India, we see that the last was the Harsha Empire. In southern India, when 600 AD it was there, so there were Chalukyas. Okay, Chalukyas, and then downwards we find there was Pallavas. Okay, this is the chronology in the North India. So now here you will find that 2-3 things are happening. After Harsha and Chalukyas, etc., you will find that there is a tripartite struggle going on. There are Rashtrakutas because they have replaced Chalukyas. Then there are Gurjar Pratiharas and there is Palas. So Palas are in Bengal. Rashtrakutas have replaced Chalukyas in around Karnataka region. And then there is Gurjar Pratihara in the Delhi around region. Okay, UP, MP, Delhi around region. So this is the struggle between these 3 dynasties is called as the tripartite struggle. This has been asked in the UPSC prelims examination also. Okay, so Palas are ruling in Bengal and Bihar, and Dev Pala is one of the greatest Pala kings who established. So you will find that there are a lot of Bengalis present in the Southeastern Asian nations. Apart from the Tamilians and Telugus and the South Indian people, you will find that there are a lot of Bengalis, and the Bengali contact goes like to this Pala Empire, where Palas established a great contact with this Southeast Asian nation of Indonesia. Okay, and that is why it is written that Sri Vijaya was the Indonesian king that time, and Indonesian kingdom, and then Devpala established a great contact with them. Then there are Gurjar Pratiharas of Kannauj, same Kannauj where Harsha used to rule. Okay, and there are Parmars in the Dhar region also, and then there are Chandelas in the Bundelkhand. These are the same Chandelas under whose dynasty you will find what temple getting built in Nagra style of architecture. Have you heard about Khajuraho temples? Okay, have you heard about the great temple of Lord Shiva built in the Khajuraho style? So it is the same temple which is built by these Chandelas. Okay, so Chandelas were the dynasty who ruled in Bundelkhand. Okay, and this is a very prominent style of Nagra style of architecture. Okay, and what is so special about Khajuraho style? First of all, so see, if I have to draw Khajuraho style of architecture or temple building, you will find that Khajuraho style, basically there are there is not one temple. Okay, there are like too many temples. They look like a mountain range if you see them from like far behind. Okay, they don't have a wall, unlike the Odisha style which had a wall. Okay, and they are obviously there on the upraised platform. Okay, there are extensive carvings present on the wall. they have something called as a veranda concept. So here what you will find that there is a temple and then there are verandas. Why? Because there is extensive carving and sculptures outside, so they want people to see it. Okay, and then you will also find that there are like erotic figures present. Okay, so this is all very what you guys special feature of the Khajuraho style of architecture, which is a part of the Nagara style. Okay, then there are Chauhans, as I already told you, in Rajasthan, and here only you will find one great ruler in Chauhan dynasty, which is the Prithviraj Chauhan. Okay, he's the same Chauhan who will defeat in two battles, 1191 and 1192 AD. So he fights two battles. In 1191 he defeats whom? Ghori, and in 1192 he gets defeated. Okay, so there are Chauhans ruling in the Rajasthani area, and then you will find there is one in Kannauj you will find that there is one Gahadwala king, okay, Jai Chandra, who is defeated and slain by Muhammad Ghori in the battle of Chandrawar in 1194. See, what is happening is actually these two things are related. You know why? Because this Jai Chandra, he was actually a close associate of this Prithviraj Chauhan. Okay, and then there was some love angle wherein Prithviraj Chauhan and Jai Chandra's daughter basically, I think, fell in love with Prithviraj Chauhan, and Prithviraj Chauhan is said to be eloped with him. I don't know the exact story, but this was like the story given in one of the novels. Okay, and then what happens is basically Jai Chandra wants to take the revenge, and therefore he tries to coordinate with Muhammad Ghori. So this Muhammad Ghori basically fights Prithviraj Chauhan. In 1191 he gets defeated, like Muhammad Ghori gets defeated, but then Muhammad Ghori comes back again 1 year later and he defeats Prithviraj Chauhan. So now Muhammad Ghori and this Jai Chandra are friends. But after that, the differences appear between these two also, and finally Jai Chandra is defeated in 1194 by the same Muhammad Ghori who defeats Prithviraj Chauhan in the 1192 battle. Okay, I know these are like complicated stories. That is why I'm telling you, remember them only if they're related to your state. Okay, because these are like, especially this Jai Chandra story is not that important unless you're from Rajasthan and you're giving RPSC. Okay. Then you will find in 1177 AD there is Prithviraj III, who is also known as Raj Pithora, and he defeats Muhammad Ghori in the first battle of he's the same Prithviraj. Okay, he defeats these Muhammad Ghori in the first battle of Tarain in 1191 AD. Okay, and in the same meanwhile, when there is Chauhans here, okay, then there is Gurjar Pratiharas here, there is Rashtrakutas here, there are Palas here. Okay, you will in the same time you will find that in MP there is a small dynasty called as there is a small dynasty whose King Bhoj you might have King Bhoj you might have heard, on whose name is the Bhoj wetlands. Okay, which is also a Ramsar site named in India. Okay, so in India has how many sites? Ramsar sites? India has around 38 or 37 sites, right? Because we earlier had 27, then there was an addition of, yeah, I think there are 37 sites because even the Sundarbans got added, and then there were 10 more sites added very, very recently, in which 6 were from UP. Okay, that is why I'm saying please keep track. Do not lose the history and see history, environment, etc. as a different ball game together. They are all interconnected. So Bhoj wetlands are the same Bhoj wetlands named after King Bhoj, okay, which was present there in the Madhya Pradesh at this time, like 1080, which was like so long back. Okay, so Bhoj is the most versatile and striking Parmar ruler, and I told you that there was a Parmar dynasty here, remember, of the Dhar region. So King Bhoja is one of the ruler here. Okay, and he was also one of the very literate person who authored many books, and he is also known as one of the greatest scholar kings of India. So that is why he is remembered as. Okay, now, so till here we have studied like how the Northern Indian Empire, which was once under one ruler, like Mauryan dynasty or Gupta dynasty, is now getting broken into different dynasties. Okay, and we saw how basically Mahmud of Ghori came. There were so many battles, etc. But before Mahmud of Ghori, he was a second. You can see he was a second invader who came to India. But before him, there was a first invader who came to India who actually looted all these Somnath temples and all, and he was Mahmud of Ghazni. So you need to remember that basically the Islam got established around 700 AD. Okay, and after that the first ruler who conquered or who invaded India, and he did not want to actually conquer India. He just wanted to he had heard India as being an enormous wealthy country, and he wanted to loot that wealth. Okay, he did not want to stay and rule the country. So Mahmud of Ghazni, he came to India, he looted wealth. He was the one who actually attacked Somnath temple like 17 times. He looted all the wealth whatever he could, and then he went back. And after him came the Muhammad Ghori, who had to finally battle with Prithviraj Chauhan and Jai Chandra, etc. Because he wanted to sort of like get the wealth also and rule some part of India also. Okay, and then you will find that 1192, I told you there was a second battle of Tarayan. So battle of Tarayans are basically two battles which are fought between Prithviraj Chauhan and Muhammad Ghori. Okay, in first battle this Muhammad Ghori loses, and in the second battle Prithviraj Chauhan is defeated, and they happen in the year gap of 1 year. Okay, and finally you will find that in 1206 AD, okay, this is the point wherein finally you will start with the medieval history. Okay, why? Because here Muhammad Ghori gets like defeat, like he basically dies, and then you will find that he basically he had one of his slaves like Kutubuddin Aibak, who basically establishes a slave dynasty or Mamluk dynasty in India, which becomes the first Delhi Sultanate dynasty. Okay, so we have started with the ancient and reached till the medieval. But before that, what we'll do, we'll take a quick snapshot of what we have done till now. Okay, so it will be really, really easy, and it will become really, really interesting also. So first of all, what we'll do is we'll start from the prehistoric time, wherein we studied about Paleolithic, Mesolithic, and Neolithic. Okay, then we went to proto-history, which is also called as the, so this is all prehistory, Stone Age. Proto-history is Chalcolithic or Copper Stone Age, wherein we talk about the Indus Valley civilization. Okay, then comes the Vedic age, which is also called as the Iron Age, because here iron got discovered, and that is why you will find that the Aryans were able to invade a large part of India, because they could make iron tools which were much more sharper, which were much more effective in cutting the forest and like clearing the path, and which were also used for making chariots. Okay. So in the Vedic age, you have Rig Vedic age and you have later Vedic age. Okay, after Vedic age, there was 600 BC, wherein we found out there were 2-3 things. There was like establishment of Buddhism, Jainism, and Zoroastrianism. There was rise of Mahajanpadas, and at the same time, we also found what? We also thought that the rise of Magad Empire. In the Magad Empire, then we basically around 600 AD only, 600 BC only. So we will find that in Magad Empire, it started with Haryanaka dynasty, where we had Bimbisar and Ajatsattu. Then we went on to Saisunga dynasty, where we studied about Kalasok. Then we went into Nanda's dynasty, where we studied about Mahapadmananda and Dhananda. Then we went to Mauryan Empire, and we studied about Chandragupta Maurya, then his son Bindusar, and then finally Ashok. Okay, after Ashok, we discussed how this last ruler of Mauryan dynasty was killed by his own general, which was basically Sunga. So after Mauryas came the Sungas, wherein we talked about the Sungas, Pushyamitra Sunga and Agrimitra Sunga. Okay, after Sungas came the Kanvas, and at the same time we saw that there were 4 invasions. There were Sakas, there were Bactrians, Sakas, Parthians, and Indo-Greeks. Okay, in Indo-Greeks, one of the dynasties that we studied was basically Kushan Empire, and Kushan also we studied about Kanishka. Okay, and after and this Kanishka's time, basically around 300 BC to 300 AD is the time when we also have a Satavahan dynasty. Okay, also called as the Andhra Bhoj. Okay, and then after that in the North India we have Gupta Empire coming up. Okay, in Gupta, Sri Gupta was the one who actually established the empire. Then we studied about Chandragupta, then we studied about Samudragupta, and then we studied about Chandragupta II. And Chandragupta II only had the court of Navratnas. Okay, after Gupta Empire, basically we have Harsha Empire in the north. Okay, from Kannauj. Okay, now at the time when there is a Gupta Empire in the north, okay, and there is Kushan Empire in the north, we are also in the South India, we have something called as the Sangam Age running at the same time. In Sangam Age, I'm deleting this so that we can get space to write. So basically, you have Sangam Age in the south when we have Kushanas and Guptas in the north. So in Sangam Age, you will find you have Cheras, Cholas, and Pandyas, which is also called as Tamil Elam. Okay, three great dynasties ruling that period. And after Sangam Age, we have Pallavas in the South India. At the same time, we have Harsha Empire here. Okay, and after Pallavas, basically Pallavas at the same time you also have Chalukyas. Okay, and after Chalukyas, basically you find Rashtrakutas replacing them. And basically after Rashtrakutas, you find Chola Empire. Okay, in the southern India around 1100 AD. Okay, 1000 AD or 1100 AD. But in the North India, what is happening after Harsha Empire? Basically, when in the southern India you have Chola Empire and see Chalukyas and Chalukyas, Rashtrakutas and Cholas. So this is happening around 600 to 1000 AD. Okay, in the same time period, you will find in the North India, you have 3 dynasties coming up and little small dynasties like Chauhans in Rajasthan. You have Gurjar Pratiharas, you have Rashtrakutas here, and you have Palas in the Bengal and Bihar region. Okay, and you also have Parmars in the Madhya Pradesh region. The King Bhoj is the ruler. Okay, at the same time, you will also find 700 AD is the time when Islam got established, and here you will find basically the invasion started happening. So first came the Ghazni. Okay, and Mahmud of Ghazni, and after him around 1000 AD, basically you will find coming of Mahmud of Ghori. Okay, and Mahmud of Ghori fought these battles of Tarayan with the Prithviraj Chauhan. So after death of Mahmud Ghori, you will find that finally, and this is happening in 1191 AD. Okay, and this is the time when there are Cholas or imperial Cholas in the south. So why is there so much deviation in the north and south? Because northern area has this northwestern portion, which is like the plain area, which does not have many mountains, and this is like open for invasion. Okay, while South India is basically protected by the sea, so you will find that Southern Indian empires are coming in a different way. But in Northern India, there is so many changes of powers that are happening. Okay, and see, when you even come from north, it takes a lot of time to actually cross Vindhyas and the Satpuras, Narmada, Tapi, etc., and then you reach south. So it's not like anybody who's entering India can just directly go to south. No, they'll first establish their empire in the northern, get a stronghold, and then they will move south. Okay, that is why you'll see that southern Indian empires were much more protected than the northern Indian empires. And these empires basically were established. Like Pallavas took their own time, sweet time, Cholas took their own time because they got time for development. While in northern India, they had continuous forces empowering, and they had to face competition from South India, this southwestern India, northwestern India, then East India, then from here also. So basically, these northern empires were facing competition from all the sides. Okay, and after this, basically, and death of Mahmud Ghori, you will study about the starting of Delhi Sultanate, which is basically the starting of the medieval Indian history. Okay, so you will now see we'll move to the next part. So this was the ancient Indian history, starting from the Stone Age till the point we have death of Mahmud Ghori. And so this is all for this lecture, and please give your support, and we hope that you're liking these lectures, because I don't think that any of these institutes have come up with such a comprehensive coverage of the entire history. Okay, and this wall chart is amazing if you really want to excel in this examination. Thank you.